Hey, what is going on, military journeyman? In this video, I am interviewing my good friend MST1 August Klotz about his experience of being a recruiter. So now, this video is not going to be for the people that are interested in joining the Coast Guard. This is more for the people that are in the Coast Guard or interested in becoming a recruiter themselves. We're going to be answering a lot of questions that I had and that probably lots of other people would have about what the recruiter life is like. So for those of you that don't know, when you join the Coast Guard, you have different options to take up different types of jobs. Now, August Klotz, he's been a recruiter now for nearly 8 years. He was a recruiter active in New York City, and now he is a recruiter instructor over in Cape May. So he has a lot of experience in this type of work environment in the Coast Guard. So if you're interested in becoming a recruiter, or you're interested in what the recruiter life is like, then this video is going to be that. So let's just roll into this. Even in the Coast Guard, this is why this is pretty special, because even in the Coast Guard, people don't realize that, like in the Marines, you have to become either like a recruiter, or you have to do some type of outside of your MOS or outside of your job. But in the Coast Guard, recruiting, not everybody can become a recruiter, and it's very selective. So can you kind of walk through, that process, if for those that are interested in becoming recruiters, and what that is like?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully you it might plant a little seed in you there too, for consideration. Yeah, exactly. You're 100% right. It's not forced on anybody in the Coast Guard. You have to apply and be selected. You have to compete for it. The process, it was well in advance of the regular transfer season, special assignments, same time that they solicit for company commanders and any type of special assignment. It's done usually in advance, if there's any additional screening, in advance from the normal typical assignment year. So pay attention to the Coast Guard message board. When that message comes out, it'll walk you through it. Essentially, if it hasn't changed much, and I've known plenty of recruiters that came to the school, they told me a little bit about the differences now versus when I came into recruiting. But essentially, you put together a package, you submit it. They want to make sure you have the fit too. So you send a picture of front and side and introps to make sure you're representing the Coast Guard well. I mean, you're going to be the face of the Coast Guard. So they have you do that. They have you go through an interview. I would say I've been on the other end of some of these interviews. I would say mostly it's to determine the character of whoever wants to be a recruiter. It's mostly to get to know them, what their communication skills are, how they can overcome challenges. Because there's a lot of challenges in recruiting, but it's mostly just to get to know, is this person a good fit to be a recruiter? Not everybody is, So you go through that, and they go through and they select. It's just like an officer panel. They'll go in, they'll get all their applications. They will have done an interview and a short summary of the interview from the interviewers. And it'll go into a panel. They'll close the door. They'll pick out their best, and whoever got picked, hey, congratulations, you're gonna be a recruiter. After that, then you get your assignment pick. So what my advice to anybody that would want to be a recruiter, I think I told you this already. First, you gotta want to be a recruiter. First, you want to go out there and find people to serve in our uniform. After that, then you can worry about where you're getting assigned. And it's probably very similar to when you're a third class coming straight from A school. You don't really get to choose where you get assigned. You got to make the best of it and get those qualifications and rank up so that you can get your next assignment. And depending on where you go, what you do, how you perform, that can influence. You can build your sphere of influence to maybe turn it around and get a better billet next time. So I think it's really important for anybody that would want to be a recruiter to definitely want to be a recruiter first. Don't even think about where you're going to be a recruiter. Think about that as an afterthought.
And can you kind of talk about what it's like being a recruiter, and why someone would want to become a recruiter?
I think yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge. There's a lot of challenges in there, and my challenge was New York, very big city, that learning that and trying to get people into recruiting. I think the best setup for me to be a recruiter was the boarding officer. I think even just going through boot camp, you get a level of assertiveness that you probably didn't have prior to going to basic training. I definitely got a lot of that from boarding officer to boarding officer as well. So to me, I think it's mostly about networking. It's just networking, and being able to tell what the Coast Guard story is, what it's provided to you, and what it could be, what's in it for you, right? This is what we have. And we also at that same time have to say, are you right for the Coast Guard? It's a fine balancing act being a recruiter. I forgot the second part of that question you asked.
And what is the life like for a recruiter? Like, why would somebody, why is it so selective, or why is it so challenging to be able to get picked up for a recruiter? Like, what are the things that make it so unique?
Yeah, a lot of ratings, they may or may not, interact with the public as much, and not just the public, but very young, impressionable people that you need to be the guy. I mean, very similar to, there's a reason company commander and recruiter are special assignments. They don't want anybody to be a company commander. They don't want anybody that just wants to yell at people, be a company commander. They want the people that are going to take pride in the uniform, not necessarily enjoy the job of yelling at recruits, but know that there is a reason for it. Same thing with recruiting. There's a lot of challenges. There's some tough parts about it. There's some tough aspects. But ultimately, we're doing it for a number of different reasons. We could be passionate. We love the Coast Guard, and we want the best for the Coast Guard. So I find it enjoyable because you get to see that next generation. We all have our expiration date on us. Mine's coming up in a couple of years, getting ready to retire, and, I loved growing up in the Coast Guard and talking to some of those old salties and them passing down their sea stories. And, it's a different Coast Guard than it was back then. And they had to take me on as a young coastie and show me the ropes so that I could become my Coast Guard as well. And now it's my Coast Guard, and I want to pass that Coast Guard on to the next generation.
What is it like being a recruiter, though, compared to, let's say, some of the other services like Marines? Like when I think of like the Army or the Marines, recruiters, they're very, I think of someone that's very aggressive, very almost like salesy. I was offered candy and told that I could drive a tank when I first thought about joining the I think it was the Army. And I've heard that also other stories, from friends that it can also be very demanding and draining. How does that differ from being a recruiter in the Coast Guard?
Yeah, well, one thing, we have way less resources. Same story all around the Coast Guard, right? So the one part of the battle of being a Coast Guard recruiter is educating. Is we exist, we exist, and we're an option for you. That's a big part. I think I mentioned to you on our previous phone call, I did a little research. There's over 10,000 Navy recruiters, and there's about 350 Coast Guard recruiters. Now that's just one branch, one of the biggest branches versus the smallest branch. So that is a big challenge, is not just, hey, this is what's in it for you. Hey, we are an option. Hey, we have all the same benefits as the other branch, and this is what we do. Most people have no idea all of the missions that the Coast Guard does. That's a big challenge. So we don't have as many resources, but the benefit is, and I love all the services. I love all my brothers and sisters in arms. I think we got a better product. It is for me. I think it's more family oriented. I mean, I've been in almost 18 years now, and nowhere I go do I not see somebody that I served with somewhere else. It just doesn't happen. I'm waiting for one of my recruits to come through recruiting school, and I think that I could go out on a good note with that if I put one of my recruits and they become a recruiter. If that happens while I'm teaching recruiter school, I'll be happy to retire.
So what is the actual work life of Coast Guard recruiter though? Do you have like minimum quotas that you have to reach to be able to like get people in? Are you, because there's a lack of resources that you have to like compensate for that and like the amount of work? What exactly do you mean by when there's not enough resources? How does that affect Coast Guard recruiters?
Recruits or recruiters? Recruiters. I mean, at least most of my time that I was in New York, I felt spread pretty thin. What's the most common complaint about recruiters, just in general, military, including the Coast Guard, is I can't get a hold of my recruiter, and I hate that perception.
That's a whole military-wide thing. That's not just a Coast Guard thing.
It is. It's definitely Coast Guard though. And part of that is, I'm not trying to make an excuse, but part of that is, there's 350 of us for the whole nation, and then there's 10,000. Yeah, there's a little bit more of them, but I'm not trying to make any excuses. I always try to fight that perception. I try to be as responsive as I can be, but it always felt like, I make some leeway over here, and I'm working with this applicant. As soon as I get any leeway, I get another phone call, or I get pulled in so many different directions. So there's another challenge for you. But like I said, I think we have a better overall product. I think Marines aren't for everybody. The Coast Guard's not for everybody. The Air Force isn't. The Space Force isn't for everybody. But I think it's for a lot more people than actually know what it's about. And that's why we have such a huge percentage of people that come from prior service. There was not a single day that went by in New York when I was in the office where I didn't have prior Army, prior Navy, prior Air Force, prior Marines. The guy that I worked next to, ET1 Tim Young, he's still a recruiter. He's getting ready to transfer out of New York right now. He was a Marine. I always used to pop my head up and say, "Hey, Tim, I'm a Marine too. Science technician, ST, a Marine ST." I was just messing with them.
What does a typical day for a Coast Guard recruiter look like?
So one of the things that I think was a benefit, at least to me as a recruiter in the Coast Guard versus the Army, and to answer your earlier question, there is a mission. We have a mission of overall recruits. Each office has its own mission, how many recruits we have to put in. Our goal is to get to that mission. Typical day, that's what I love about being a recruiter in the Coast Guard, is you got a lot of autonomy. Here's your mission. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for fit people that, want to make a positive change in the world and are willing to work hard. Core values, right? Honor, respect, devotion to duty. If they can meet those, it doesn't matter where they come from. They can be in the Coast Guard, and they could succeed in the Coast Guard. So the recruiters are given a lot of autonomy. Find them, go find them. So you can really be creative in how you go about that. Some of it is, like I said, educating. You want to network and find schools, we call them centers of influence. Find centers of influence that can help, spread your word. Hey, we are hiring, and this is what we're looking for. If you know anybody that fits this description, is in decent shape, can be in decent shape, or would be willing to get into decent shape, willing to work hard to make a positive change in the world. If they can meet that, we're good for them. And if you can find that, doesn't matter how, as long as you're ethical and you're living up to the Coast Guard core values, you can get creative in how you go about and do that. So that's probably what I loved about recruiting the most is networking and just getting to know people, and then keeping that network alive through communication, using centers of influence.
So really, the day is up to you how you use it. There is someone telling you like, oh, you've got to go to this school, or oh, you have to do this event, or you need to talk with these people, or you get to choose how you're gonna spend your day.
So the recruiter in charge, the RIC, has a lot of leeway. That's their office. They're in the overall management position of the office. It's very similar to an officer in charge of a Coast Guard station. Um, so they set the tone, but oftentimes they will also be, because it's always usually high performing. You got to be at least a second, or a first to be a recruiter. So they want experienced coasties. And if you go through that screening process, you're probably at least somewhat a high performing second or a first. You can give autonomy to most of those people. Probably the best job for a chief in the Coast Guard is to be an RIC. You should have high performing seconds and firsts that just need to go out there and find people, just need to interact and network and talk to people and tell them the great opportunities that the Coast Guard can provide. If you can do that, and you don't make the Coast Guard look good, you could be a good recruiter. Especially if it's right here. If you have a passion for the Coast Guard, I don't ever try to recruit somebody and say you should be a Marine science technician. There's enough of that in the Coast Guard. You go to a first small boat station or a cutter, you got the bosun mates telling you need to be a bosun's mate. You got the machinery technicians saying be a machinery technician. There's enough of that in the Coast Guard. You definitely don't need that from a recruiter as a first introduction to, hey, this is the Coast Guard. You can figure out, there's so many different pathways you can go in the Coast Guard.
What would you say is probably some of the most surprising things that you didn't know prior to becoming a recruiter that maybe you wish you had known?
Didn't know. I mean, I didn't know. It's like being a new Marine science technician. I didn't know any of the rules, the regulations, the policies. That would have been beneficial. Unfortunately for me, the recruiting environment that I came into and the recruiting office that I came into, the recruiting mission was way, way down low. And I think a lot of those recruiters just kind of got into that mode of processing. Pick up the phone. We're going to get the leads that come to us from the website. And to me, that was always like, okay, marketing's doing its job, and people are coming from gocoaster.com or the YouTube channel or from word of mouth, other coasties with YouTube channels, whatever the case might be. Okay, great. They're out there doing their job. We don't just need people sitting in the office picking up phones. We need people going out into communities full time and interacting. That's what a recruiter's job really is, if you ask me. And then so many new recruiters, they get bogged down by that regulation stuff, all the paperwork stuff, and not having a lot of resources to make it easy. I think that's the case. They get bogged down by that, and then they sort of fall back down into that mode. And I don't want to generalize. I shouldn't say that. I've seen it happen, but not all. I know there's a lot of great recruiters out there that are, kind of making recruiting their own thing, their own style to it. They're gonna find the next generation of the Coast Guard their way, and however that works, it's gonna work. Whether it's social media, volunteering, stuff that they might do otherwise in the Coast Guard anyways. So you could take that, and it could be very similar to a cutter. The job's never done. There's always more you can do.
And with that, what's the work schedule like for a recruiter? Is because you have that autonomy and because you're trying to hit your mission. Are you working more hours than maybe what you anticipated, and that's just kind of expected, or is it like a normal work schedule or something similar to like an MST?
So I'm talking to you on my recruiter phone right now. I have that everywhere I go. That's always there. Like obviously I'm going to screen my calls though. I don't there shouldn't be any emergencies for an applicant to call at 2 o'clock in the morning. If it is, it's the applicant that I know is shipping off the next day and I want to answer that call and what's wrong, what can I help you with? But if it's a weird phone number, they can leave a voicemail or send a text. So most recruiters, they have a pretty good work-life schedule. Hey, chief, the recruiter in charge, I got this school on Monday. I'm going to be there all day. I got this school on Tuesday. I'm going to be there all day. I got this school on Wednesday, and I'm going to be there all day. I'm going to take care of some of my applicants on Thursday, and then on Friday, I got another school event that I'm going to go to, and this is it. So there could be that, but you can very easily fall into, I got all these events. Now I'm missing that aspect of all the paperwork stuff for the applicants that I'm working with right now that are already kind of sold on the Coast Guard, or they're just waiting on the process. So it's a fine balancing act all around. For me, I just stay busy all the time. There's always more to do, which may be something to do with why Coast Guard Recruiting Command asked me to teach the school. And I tried to carry that into the school. I tried to make, for my part of it, the recruiter school that I didn't have, because I was in my recruiting office for 8 months before I went to recruiter school. And I kind of learned it the hard way, the old college try. I don't know something, look it up in the manual, go through it, rinse, wash, and repeat for the next applicant that asks the same question. So it took me 8 months to go to recruiter school. Not my fault. Whatever the case may be, it was a different mission at the time, different command at the time. But I try to make the schoolhouse what I didn't have. I think it's a benefit. I wish I went to recruiter school before I had. So just the knowledge up there about all the policies. Everything else you can take your experience and translate that into how you want to go out and recruit people.
Is that what being a recruiter really is, though? From what you were saying, is you're going to a lot of schools. Is that if you have a 4 or 5 year tour, is that majority going to be filled up with going to schools every single week, and everybody in the office is basically trying to hit the same schools, or are you finding like schools that nobody goes to? Like how do you fill that time period with all of those people that might be in that office?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the big difference. Every recruiter is going to have a little bit different, and it really depends on how the recruiter in charge, the chief, is operating the office too. For me, I had a ton of autonomy because if this was my time in New York, not only was I scheduling events for myself and going out there and doing these events, I was scheduling events for other people, and really the recruiter presence for scheduling events, large scale events like Fleet Week in New York, or countrywide events like I would volunteer to go temporary duty to Skills USA, where they have culinary competitions for high school grades. They have carpentry competitions, welding competitions, everything that relates directly into a rating in the Coast Guard. Culinary, you're passionate about culinary arts and you're competing nationwide or even just regionally wide for culinary arts. It just screams culinary specialist, right? Like, you're passionate about food. That's the kind of culinary specialist that we want. You're passionate about metal work or computer work. That's the kind of ITs we want. That's the kind of damage control that we want. But it really depends. There's some recruiters that they will pick up the phone and they will process. They won't go out there and find. I'm not going to deny that exists. I'd like to think the majority know. They're happy to go out and find people. That's the most reporting part, is not processing somebody. Can you really say that you recruited somebody if you didn't go out there and find them and sell them on the Coast Guard? Give them the idea. I don't know if you can. You process them into the Coast Guard. And we could just have operators picking up the phone for that. We could. And that's all that's required, the Go Coast Guard chat. Those are trained recruiters, but their full-time job is just chatting and filtering people to the recruitings at all the different offices that are out there.
Awesome. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share about being a recruiter or recruiter school or anything like that? Definitely wanted to hit on some last questions for, from the perspective of a recruit, speaking to a recruiter. But if you wanted to pass anything to anybody that, anybody in the Coast Guard or anybody that is interested in joining and becoming a recruiter, anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you're up for a challenge, taking to the next level. People don't believe me that when I say I've worked harder as a recruiter because it's something that I enjoy. Find something you'll enjoy and you'll never work a day in your life. I've put more hours. I've invested more hours into recruiting. The year that I was over in the Middle East, I could not take leave, and we had like 3 times the operational hours of the 110 on the 110 that I was on over there. I worked harder in recruiting, but I've also enjoyed it and had a really great time. It's not for everybody. If you'd like to get out there and spread the word and maybe pass that torch on to the next generation, help find the next generation. If you've ever had somebody that you've worked for, worked with, or had work with you that you think, who recruited this person and why is this person in the Coast Guard? They're out there. You could be a part of that solution and help influence that next generation of who's going to serve in the United States Coast Guard when you're long gone. So if there's anybody out there like that, give recruiting a chance, at least look into it, talk to a recruiter, and get their perspective.
If you're planning on joining the Coast Guard and you want to be connected with other people that are preparing to go to boot camp, then you should join our Facebook group, the Coast Guard Boot Camp Preppers, to connect with other people in the military journeyman community. Go ahead and share tips and tricks. If there's anything that you are doing to be able to help study, then be sure to join that group.